Welcome to Emotionally Balanced with Dido Bala, where we make emotional regulation easy and accessible for you and everyone. Join me and my guests for real conversations and practical tools to help you navigate life's ups and downs with confidence, calm, and clarity. Welcome to Emotionally Balanced with Dido Bala. I'm Dido, your host, and today's episode is with Sarah Asem. She is a personal development coach, which is also what we call an emotionologist. You're going to see what that means when you listen to the episode. She's somebody who knows so much about emotions and has a wide global experience about what emotions feel like and look like and show up in different contexts, personally, professionally, and culturally, because she has a background from Jordan, is living in Spain, has lived in the US, and she's also a parenting expert. So we talk about so many different topics today. We talk about the importance of understanding who you are internally, how to regulate your emotions externally, and how to honor your context to do that well. We dive into male versus female stereotypes and the emotions that men are quote unquote allowed to feel versus women. So it's full. I can't wait for you to dive in. You are going to enjoy this one. Check it out. Enjoy the show. Let's do it. All right, we are officially live. This is one that I've been looking forward to for a really, really long time. Sarah, thank you so much for being here. You are somebody that I've met, I believe, is it before or after, before COVID or during COVID?
No, I think it was during COVID actually.
Yeah,
During COVID
during.
because I was in Extremadura, in the middle of nowhere, with all the nature and just birds and the water and pretty much nothing else, and mountains and deers and stuff. And yeah, that's when we met and we started just working, and we didn't stop
Okay.
connecting as friends and through work. So it's
It
been
feels
a lovely ride.
it feels like 15 years ago. So I think it's maybe the COVID effect. So it's I've been looking forward to this. We've had so many of these conversations offline, and since then we have done so much work together. But before anything, I want to just say thank you for saying yes to the invitation. I'm so happy you're here.
Oh, thank you for having me. This just feels like another day with you on our
Okay.
weekly connects.
So let's do this. So all right. So as you know, the topic here is emotional regulation, and there is nothing, in my view, more important than emotions because we are human beings who feel
Mm.
before we are human beings who think. It is easy to kind of use the prefrontal cortex, the quote unquote thinking part of the brain, and always make it seem like we have it figured out logically. We have it figured out cognitively. We have the story that has led us here. We understand the story of tomorrow. But the truth is, most of our experiences come from feelings first, from emotions first. And you have a very, very unique background personally and professionally. But the thing is, emotions are global and universal. If you are a human being, no matter where you live, where you were born, who you are married to, who you are connected to, who your father is, who your mother is, emotions are going to be part of your experience. And as somebody with a background that goes from Jordan to living in Spain to having gone to school in the US and having trained people from China, from Romania, from all over the place. I'm just very curious to know what your perspective is on emotions, especially as it pertains to us as human beings from different backgrounds.
Mm. Yes, I mean emotions is one of my favorite topics, because what is life without feeling, right? It doesn't really make sense, right? What Imagine if our emotions were stripped from us. Like we wouldn't even know. I don't think we would know what hit us really without the emotions. But really, we get struck by how we feel because emotions are mostly unconscious. We can't really control them. They show up, and it kind of depends on our capacity every day. And it does have a cultural influence. I mean, I have seen that even in language there are some emotions or some concepts about emotions that do not exist in languages or exist and pertain to religion. And so it's not, it doesn't make sense in just, conversational connection. But emotions are really important. What they're and why they're important, because it gives us information about our surroundings and what we are really taking in from them. Right? It's me in this environment, and what is it telling me about how I feel here? What is it telling me about me? What is it? What is the information that I'm gathering? And so it really, really helps us navigate who we are. And emotional regulation is what helps us navigate on the outside, right? Because what's inside is so personal that, the waves, the ups and downs, we can contain. We know they're happening within. And we just take that pause and regulation to be able to respond in the best way possible for us in our environment. But then I feel we have to go home and we have to go within to really sit with what has happened in whatever situation and make peace with it or be curious about it. Ask us what it's trying to tell us, what lesson, um, I don't know, what information, what's going on there. And the more we are aware of how we're feeling in certain situations, the more um, we are able to, I think, be more flexible and compassionate in life. But I don't know if you want to talk about a certain culture and how they navigate emotions, because it's so hard to just pick one. Um, from all the countries and the people I have met and I have trained, where we've had, sometimes, we've been lost in translation, or it's hard to even read uh, how they're feeling, because emotions are also, they're physical, with a smile, body language, a look. And, in some cultures, you're not allowed to smile showing your teeth, or you're not allowed to laugh in certain environments. Um, so sometimes, it's hard to connect that way. So there's a lot of
Mm.
going on the inside, like the physiological, biological situation, like heartbeats, sweating, the nerve popping out of, the vein popping out of your forehead. There's a lot of physiological stuff going on. Um, there's also just the physical, the smile, the eye contact, body language, and then that is and the unconscious response to what's going on, that I think has a lot to do with how you're feeling um, that day. Because sometimes we can be like really emotionally strong and regulated, and other days just something small can really derail us.
Okay, so let's do it this way. So the first very important thing that you have just taught us is that there's something different about emotions from when they happen within to what we do with them on the outside.
Yes.
Because we could all experience something similar inside within different contexts, and that's one thing. But emotional regulation has to do with how we deal with those emotions, how we navigate them externally. And so, given that difference of navigating emotions externally and the different cultural contexts that people have, necessarily how they regulate their emotions are different one way or another, or are they similar, right? And I want to go a little, like, I want to go be specific here. I want to think about specific cultures. You mentioned something like uh, not smiling, not showing your teeth when you smile. There's something about crying. I know, for example, that on one of the episodes that I've had, we've discussed the importance of using tools such as letting your emotions come out, right?
Mm.
Whether it be crying, sometimes allowing yourself to cry is a way to regulate your emotions. I mean, sometimes that's all you need, in fact. Let those tears come out and then cry. Sometimes it's like laugh. I mean, I have friends who, when something is very uncomfortable, they start laughing out loud. And
Hmm.
it looks awkward. But for those who know them, they know it's a way for them to regulate their emotions. That's what works for them. Some people, they need movement. And so if you then happen to live in a culture where, for example, crying is not only frowned upon, but it's severely societally punished, right? So if you cry and people see you, either they shun you or they attack your character, or it means something that is not positive about who you are. Had those one regulate emotions in those contexts. And if you mentioned cultures where perhaps like smiling or laughing and showing your teeth would not be the way. I mean, to most people who might be listening to this, they're like, "What? What are you talking about? How can I not smile with my teeth and show my teeth?" So I want you to go a little deeper within anything that you want within that context of the cultures are different, but we have emotional experiences internally, and how do we then regulate? And I'm wondering if, I'm thinking out loud, I wonder if this also is giving us an insight into the importance of understanding your culture, right? Okay, I'm going to say one more thing. Then I want to pass it to you.
Mhm.
And then for someone like you or someone like me, or people who have lived in different countries, does that mean that you regulate your emotions differently depending on who you are and where you are? And as I'm thinking about that, it's fascinating to me because I was in Cameroon a few months ago, and I remember driving. I mean, driving there is chaotic. It is chaotic. You if you see it from like a drone shot, you would think, what kind of madness is this? How is nobody like dying or crashing? And yet, being in it, there's something quite peaceful about it. Even for me, as I was driving there, I was like, you know what? I know we're dangerously close to each other, but we're not going fast. We're very comfortable. So I was very emotionally settled in that there. If I was in the US,
Mm.
being that close to somebody in a car would not make me feel emotionally regulated. And so I just want you to take that anywhere you want and talk to us about those differences culturally and what we ought to do given the different context in which we may exist.
Well, definitely knowing your culture or the person that you are, communicating with or being with is important, so you can understand their emotions. Because um, this also makes me think about empathy a little bit. Because when when we are able to understand our emotions and feel them and name them, we're able to see and recognize it in someone else, right? And so that's how we can feel empathy for someone else. So if the cues of that person emotionally is not one I can recognize, for example, laughter in a moment of tension, I'm going to be totally unempathetic towards that person, right? And so that's going to create distance, when really emotions and finding similarities in our emotions brings us together, right? So if I can understand your sadness, even if I haven't suffered the same thing as you have, but I have in a different context, I come closer to you. I know how to soothe you. I might be able to even co-regulate you. But if I cannot understand what you're expressing, then that creates a kind of different distance. So I think uh, perhaps people like you and I have had the privilege of being open and curious and have lived in many different cultures, where now we have a very wide, um, resource of being able to pick up and read the room and understand people and their emotions in a very different way than other people can, right? For example, my son is one of those people who starts laughing when I get cross, right? If there's a moment of stress or I'm getting, a little bit tough, he will start, laughing. And I remember the first time he did that, I was totally offended and taken aback. I felt my authority was just like thrown to the ground, as if I was not important to him, my voice, my opinion. Um, and it really impacted me. And then after a while, he came and he says, Mom, I laughed because I was nervous. it wasn't because I didn't understand you were angry or upset. And so you get, we had that line of communication to be able to clear out the air, and it's what I expect now most of the time. But if we didn't have that moment to repair, it can be actually really damaging to relationships. So knowing your culture and knowing that about yourself, so that you can be maybe more aware of how you're responding in general, is a good idea. And also understanding, the people from different cultures whom you're going to be with, either, as a friendship, or even if you're going to network, or I don't know, present or coach or whatever you need to. It's important to know the way they express themselves, and those kind of cultural boundaries. I remember that a lot of men, it's also not only cultural, it's also like between men and women, right? Men, and I throw this question out to you: what is the most acceptable emotion for a man? Or
Well,
maybe
it's certainly,
the single most acceptable emotion for a man in
I don't
general,
know.
universally.
So I would say that anger is accepted
That's right.
from men, and it's and when I say accepted, I see it in many ways. Right? It is accepted and leveraged in a few ways.
Yeah.
Sports,
Mm-hmm.
right? The angrier you are, quote unquote, the more you can leverage that anger to crush the other team, if it's a
Mm.
team sport. From that, quote unquote, metaphorical crushing the other team to literally crushing somebody else if you are a boxer, for example, or a fighter,
Right.
right? And then you have, that's one example. Then you can leverage that for war. When
Mm.
we look for soldiers, right, it's like that channel, that anger. And I'm going to go a little further. Even when you do something that is not typically sanctioned by society, such as hurting somebody else,
Mm.
when you're a man, it's still kind of excused and accepted as, that's what men do. And
Right.
and so that, I would say, that's the emotion that is the most, quote unquote, accepted. Anything shy of that, I have many questions about. And even with the fact that there are many people that are here now, that are looking for men who are more emotionally in tune, or intelligent, and who can show a wide variety of emotions. But I don't know how ready people are for men to actually really show those other emotions, because often when they do show those emotions, there is judgment,
Mm.
um, that they are showing up in any other way emotionally than angry.
Yeah, and I think that is so unfair that we limit the breadth of an emotion, the acceptable emotion of a man solely to anger. We almost like forgive it too. Oh, he got angry. Well, yeah, he did. He got really angry about something, and because he's a man, we accept it because that's the only form of response many times, even if it's totally out of place, right? And so helping helping men be able to open up to other forms of expressing themselves, the injustice, which is what brings anger, right? The lack of respect, that makes us angry. Lack of autonomy can also make us feel frustrated and angry, right? These are all elements that I find um, very interesting. And when we talk about men being able to be more open to others, and there are a lot of them who try, I think what happens in retrospect is that I'm saying this like but I'm generalizing here, but there is a sense that we have to have a man that can be capable of getting angry to protect, but can self regulate because they need to protect. They protect the family and the kids being self regulated. They are angry and fierce to say, to keep us safe from the environment, right? So it's a very tricky place to be in, right? So how emotionally regulated do you need to be that figure?
Wow. Okay. So I've never heard it put like that. So I want to say it again. So we want men to be angry so that they can protect,
Hmm.
but we want them to be regulated so that they can protect. Is that what you said? That it was a
That's
very interesting like
exactly what I
concept.
said. So think about it
Okay.
this way. We're talking about family. It can be community. It doesn't have to be, the typical family of, husband, wife, and children. But we say community, right? The men have to protect that community. So to the outsiders in the environment, they have to be able to be angry. They have to be able to show their manhood in that way that they're allowed to express, and it's acceptable, right? To everyone else. Everyone understands a man who's angry, right? But at the same time, when he turns into the community, when he turns into the family, we want him to be able to feel, to be regulated so that he protects us in that way.
Hmm.
Do you know what I
Wow. Okay.
mean?
Yeah. This is so okay. So we want men to be angry so that they can protect us against the people who are outside of our community and might pose a threat or danger
Exactly.
to us as a community. And so that's that role of being a protector against the outside. However, when they come back within the community, in order for the folks from within the community to feel like the
Safe.
man is protecting them, then they need to not be angry. They need to be
Exactly.
regulated. So what we're saying to them is that we want you to have anger, a lot of it. In fact,
Hmm.
as much of it as possible. We just want you to control it and regulate it. Okay, I got it now. This is really, really interesting. So I want to dig a little deeper. So, is that bad? And I know I'm asking a black or white question here. So how do we feel about that, right? Is this a thing that should be encouraged, right? Because once again, the goal here, we want somebody who's listening to recognize themselves in what we're saying and to draw something from this to live a life that is more regulated for them and for their community. So as they realize this this conundrum, this dilemma we just uncovered in them, what's there to do about this?
Okay. So I have a question for you. So how, does it resonate to you? You as
It
a
does.
man?
It does, 100%.
Okay. For me, it resonates for me as a woman because if I don't have that angry, that strong man that's able to protect me from the outside and who's regulated to protect me and my family from the inside. And when he's regulated and he's on the inside, that is where also his vulnerability can bloom, right? And that's where I come in, right? That's where the women come in to to really support in
Hmm.
that space and to validate in that space because we know that he's doing a service outside being that strong protective man. If I don't have that strong protective man from the outside, what happens to me is I become the angry one and I have to come out of my feminine element to be able to protect. And I become the one who is dysregulated as a woman because I have to take on that role that is kind of naturally given to a man because also he's physically stronger. There's other elements we could look into, but so for me, that is also something that is important, and it creates dysregulation in in families, maybe in couples, in communities where we step on each other's roles in that sense, and men need that self-regulation, and women need that self-regulation as well to be able to cope in whatever circumstance they might feel that they're living in, right?
Okay, all right. So I know where we should take this. This is really, really good. All right. So if you're a man and you're listening and you can recognize yourself in what Sarah is saying, which is the anger that is in you is not only accepted and validated, but it's actually often encouraged by your community. It's really, really key, right? There is nothing wrong with you, society says, if you have a lot of anger in you.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that you then get confused when the same anger that was not only accepted and validated but was encouraged, when that same anger shows within the community, then we have a problem. And
Mm-hmm.
then you might be confused because the same people who were encouraging you to be angry and to use that anger to protect them, to to serve them, are the same people who are not telling you, well, why are you so angry? Or don't bring that anger here. And that may sound confusing, but here's the thing. The secret sauce is emotional regulation because all your emotions are valid. Your anger is valid, right? Let me start by saying that your anger is valid. The goal here is not to get rid of your emotions. Your goal is to be aware of your emotions and to manage your emotions. So the goal for you should be to learn how to manage your anger. If you can manage your anger, it means you can regulate your anger, and therefore you will know the difference between when you are in a context where your anger should be leaned on and or into, and when your anger should be managed so you can have another play a different role. Okay, that's one. That brings me to the other emotions because we got on this topic because you asked me about what is the one emotion that is accepted of
Yeah.
men. So I want to then segue into what does that tell us about the wide array of other emotions that exists that men definitely feel,
Yeah.
definitely experience, but they might just not be encouraged to feel and experience them. Talks to me about those other emotions and what do we do with them?
Yes. I mean, unfortunately, for men, and this is in usually in literature, also in movies, in every way we turn, um, men are find it very difficult to to just feel other emotions that make them feel vulnerable, right? In the sense that you're bringing your guard down, that anger, that protective, that I'm here to be of service to my family, to my community. It can bring them down and say, hey, I'm also soft. I also uh, feel sadness, loss. I feel because loss for men, for example, or lots of people who have that like very strong masculine throw, is loss is expressed with anger. Like almost like every emotion of these other emotions that they feel, what comes out, what is expressed is anger. And so they do feel all the other areas of emotions, but the way they bring it out is anger, or they can also bring it out with just turning away, right? Being absent. It almost seems that those are the two variants that they have. And I don't think we give perhaps enough resources, or we don't teach enough resources of knowing, okay, these other emotions that are in there, how do you channel them? Where do you channel them? Find your own way of channeling them. Because for us women, we have tons of ways that we are allowed to channel the area of emotions. And maybe anger is not the one we are really um, allowed that much to have. It's not like we're not allowed, we are, but it's like, oh my God, she's got a temper. It becomes like something again that can be judged as that being your whole self, instead of just being a moment in time, right? And so I think that's where we can help men, right? Think that, okay, all these area of emotions that you have, what are different ways that you feel comfortable, um, and you feel, you feel safe, as if you're not really, letting yourself down. How do you channel them? What are you going to do? You can write, you can journal, but sometimes even that suggestion, because it's private, right? It's private, it's in yourself, you can close the door. But even if you suggest writing, lots of people, the first reaction is going to be like, how's that going to help?
Mm.
Right? Movement, sports, lots of men get their anger out and running, and, putting a challenge, a physical challenge that they can overcome. That is another route that a lot of them help to self-regulate that. But I don't know if it's really channeling a certain emotion. I just feel it's a way of getting past it. It's not sitting with it, right? So I find it that it's very, very difficult for men to find those challenges and be okay with it and use it. And they keep falling on that default that maybe it's just something that's programmed, even, in our system to do. And yeah, I mean, dance, movement, that's not sports, it's expression, self expression. I don't know, rapping, singing, maybe that could be another way of getting it out. Um, uh, I don't know. There are different ways, but for men, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. So I really like your emphasis on self-expression because so Sarah just mentioned so many examples of ways in which people can regulate their emotions. Number one, acknowledging that the emotions are there,
Mhm.
naming them if you can, because if you name the emotion, then you have just given your brain a focus on what to do with it. And on the topic of only being allowed to feel anger, if you don't take the time to name your emotion, your nervous system would assume that it's the good old anger that you've been allowed to express. And so sometimes the sadness, as she said, comes off as anger,
Mm.
or the disappointment comes off as anger. So naming the emotion is important. And then you have all these examples. So you can exercise, you can dance, you can journal, you can draw, I can do all these things, but I think key is self-expression, whatever that means to you.
Mhm.
Not by playing a role of, well, I want to express myself, but men are supposed to express themselves by working out. Therefore, I'm going to work out. That is
Mm.
not what we're talking about. Because one other tool and tip that Sarah has shared is the importance of having awareness of who you are, what makes you you, right? Depending on we discussed cultures earlier. Who are you? What makes you you? If the way in which you feel like you can authentically express yourself is by coloring your hair, for example, or dancing a certain way, or painting your nails, by the way, you need to be aware of that before you fit into a box. And I can feel, even in myself, as I'm saying painting your nails, as a man, I have a little bit of something happening in me, right? Because, like, hey, I'm not doing that, right? So I feel the need to kind of say that to myself because I've been conditioned to know that, well, that's not what we do. So the point here is get to know yourself well. And self expression is so powerful because singing is self expression, being quiet is self expression, crying is self expression. And I think I'm noticing a theme of perhaps in general, men have been allowed to express themselves in ways that are more active.
Mhm.
And anything that seems to imply being still, that's why when I ask people to sit down for 90 seconds and close their eyes and just breathe, they start to panic. It's like, why? It's 90 seconds. You can do this, but there's something about having to sit down and quote unquote not doing anything, not grabbing your phone, not holding anything in your hands. That seems very scary for many people. And so I want to encourage you who's listening to take what we're saying to learn more about yourself. We're generalizing about men and women, but if you are a woman, you can also have some of those masculine traits. If you are a man, you can have some of those feminine traits. Like it's okay. And for those who have more questions about this whole masculine feminine thing, I did an episode with Saturni who that is specifically focused on that. She's a femininity coach. I struggle
Oh,
to say
wow.
that word, femininity coach, and we talked about that. So check that one out. So these aren't just binary, all this or all that. It's obviously fluid. So, what are some ways that women, from your experience,
Hmm.
are allowed to express emotions that men aren't, and or what are some of those emotions that women are allowed to express that men don't seem to be allowed to?
Well, I think if we continue like kind of generalizing a little, I
Hmm.
think women are allowed to pretty much express most of the emotions, right? We are always kind of labeled as emotional beings. You know that we're very reactive to everything. You know, one minute we're laughing, one minute we're crying, one minute we're excited, other times we're boring. We're bored. It's almost like we're not we're looked upon as if we're not like stable emotionally. She's just going through one of her phases, or it's the time of the month, or there's always an excuse to how we're feeling and what we are expressing most of the time. And I don't think a lot of them are sometimes taken seriously just because we are labeled as being so volatile in our emotions, right? And we are changing in our emotions. I love the analogy of like women are like the moon, because we have phases in the month that changes, and we're full sometimes, and then we get slowly, we become small, and then we become big again. And it's true, our bodies are made that way every single month. We get pregnant, we have babies, we go through a whole like different process each time. We go through menopause, which is a whole different, ball game. So we are changing and volatile in our emotions. So the the thing that I feel is that can hurt us is the fact that many emotions are not taken seriously. And they feel that, this will pass, or it's just a moment in time that she's going through. No one maybe empathizes to the point that they're like, hey, what's really going on? Let's get down to this. And I think that's something that can hurt us, but we are very open to feel all those emotions very intensely. And perhaps um, what we're not allowed to do, or we're not allowed to feel, or at least from my experience in many cultures, is we're not allowed to be unpleasant,
Mm.
right? So there is also the same way as the man has to be strong and angry, and the woman has to be pleasant and flexible and open and offering. So I feel that is kind of the general, if we want to look at it like a very, very, very general kind of view.
Okay, so I'm seeing a trend in this conversation on the concept of co-regulation. I'm going to say a couple of things about it, and I want to toss it back to you because we opened by talking about our experiences having lived in different cultures
Mm,
and how our emotions show up a certain way inside, and then how we regulate them have to do with the outside external context, which varies depending on where we are.
mm,
Then we talked about the importance of learning how to know your own emotions and recognize your own emotions as best as you can within your context so that you can then recognize them in other people and have empathy, because part of emotional regulation is to be able to see somebody else's emotion and recognize what they're going through. Because one, it can make you feel like you're not alone. Two, it can give you a chance to be the person that they need to regulate their emotions. But if the cultures are different, and if the genders are different, if the emotions that are accepted are different, and we never really think about them, then we may not be able to recognize in ourselves or in others what they're actually feeling. And it may lead to not taking someone seriously, or denying somebody the opportunity to have a partner to co-regulate. Because if you express a certain emotion that is not taken seriously by me, then, and say I'm your partner or your friend, I am missing out on an opportunity to help you co-regulate. If I, as a man, am expressing something that is not anger, that is sadness, but you, as a woman, does not allow me to feel that, then you are missing out on an opportunity to help me co-regulate. So I think it's really crucial for folks to understand, right? You get to know yourself better, and then by knowing yourself better, you get to recognize other emotions in other people and provide a safe space for them to also feel. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and especially about this concept of co-regulation? Because you also opened with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting because my trail of thought as you were speaking is I feel a certain, when I feel emotion, I feel it on the inside. I co regulate so that I can express it on the outside in a certain way, right? So, it doesn't only pertain to culture, but I think it also pertains very much to environment. If I get angry with a 3 year old, my 3 year old child, for example, the way I express my anger might be different to the way I express my anger or my frustration or what I'm feeling on the inside to my 16-year-old. I'm going to take it to kids, but this can be even family and culture. I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I get offended, for example, or I get triggered by a elderly man in Jordan, how I'm going to express that trigger to him, or choose or not choose to express that anger or frustration to him is going to be different if I did it when I was in Europe. I'm in Madrid, right? And that's where the cultural, you know, magic is there, right? Because I feel that in Europe it's accepted for me to express myself in a certain way, and which is might be different in Jordan as a woman being triggered. So I think self-regulation can be tricky in that sense, and it will depend. Your response is definitely going to respond on your environment and who you're speaking to. But it takes a lot of self-mastery to, when you feel triggered, no matter by whom or where, is to not go with the first thing that shows up in your mind. You know, there has to be a pause within so that you can actually take in all the information that is in your environment, because your initial trigger is really from a past experience. Every emotional action we have is based on the past, and we're not living in the past. You can be a different person, you're in a different circumstance. So if you are aware of that, you already can make that differentiation and know that in this moment, whatever I'm feeling, I can create a different response. That, I mean, if you're fast enough and quick enough, and if you do have that practice of being with yourself, you can say, okay, what do I want to make out of this new experience that I'm living? This is something that has triggered me time and time again, but I want a different outcome. Let me try this. and you respond in a different way. It's also trial and error many times. And so that pause, that moment to really understand that this reaction is coming from a past experience, I think is really important in terms of evolution and personal growth. But it's also very normal to do that. And because our brains need to keep us safe, the pause has to be really intentional, because there's no time. If this is life or death, my brain is not going to sit there going, let me see, is this a past experience or not? It has to be really, really fast in reacting to whatever is making us feel uncomfortable. So making sure we pause and that we're serene. It's okay to be quiet for a bit. I don't feel that we give ourselves enough um, space for grace in that sense. Like, I don't want to respond immediately. I want to take my time and think about what I want to say. And if it means, a couple of seconds of silence, so be it. Let me create that. It's all right. But we're not used to that. And pause is super important so that we're not just repeating past reactions time and time again, because then we're really staying emotionally in the same space and we're not moving forward, right? Being intentional about how you, being intentional about your authenticity is also very important, and checking in on, is my behavior aligned with my values, with who I want to be today, with who I feel I am. Because sometimes, it's very easy not to be aligned, right? Our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions, because we're put in these uncomfortable situations, because sometimes we fall into the trap of culture or even gender roles. So making sure that our behavior is also aligned with who I want to be, how I want to respond, and that's going to give me peace and serenity and feeling that I am moving forward.
So this is once again a journey around discovering your own authenticity
Hmm.
and realizing that that authenticity will vary though depending on your context. And that's why the version of yourself that is in Cameroon
Hmm.
and is dealing with a stressful situation will necessarily be at least slightly different than the version of yourself dealing with a similar stressful situation in New York City. And
Exactly.
the power of pausing is once again a reminder that in order to emotionally regulate, you need to be intentional at practicing this. It's not going to just happen like that. You got to practice this. And so the last thing I want to discuss with you and is parenting.
Hmm.
So we've just talked about how difficult it is to get to know yourself. We've talked about the importance of getting to understand yourself from within, depending on where you are in your context. We talked about the differences in the emotions that are allowed for certain groups of people and that aren't allowed for other groups of people. We talked about the confusion that men might experience if they are, on the one hand, encouraged to express anger and discouraged from expressing anger. And as you think about this as a parent,
Hmm.
especially a parent in a multicultural family, I wonder where that brings you. And as you talk about this, perhaps here you found a way to bring in that topic of co-regulation again, because I really want to hammer home that we've discussed self-regulation, and perhaps we do a whole other episode one day, but we have mentioned co-regulation as well. So if you can kind of talk about parenting, emotions, especially the multicultural family, and touch on co-regulation, that would be good.
Okay. Well, at least in my family ecosystem, emotions are obviously welcomed and they are very much encouraged. My three kids are very, very different in terms of personality and character to one another. I have one, my eldest son, he's very quiet. He doesn't express his emotions very clearly or as often, and he's surrounded by women that are all emotion, say what they feel, cry a lot, get frustrated a lot, especially between his youngest siblings. So sometimes he gets overwhelmed by just so much, looking at all the emotions. And sometimes it's really hard for him to just say how he feels because um, it's not like he doesn't have the vocabulary. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have a safe space. I think he just feels awkward sharing. Like he's not sure if he feels he wants to show this part of him that is a little bit vulnerable, because maybe it makes him look more like us and we're the girls, right? So I think there is that kind of this back and forth with him. But I think co-regulation has got a couple of aspects to it. One is that as a parent, if you just model emotions, not only the comfortable emotions, but also how you repair from anger. Like if I get angry or I get frustrated, how do I respond to repairing that moment of tension in the family home? Do I take a break and they see me? I need to take a break, or I go get a glass of water. I come back and I apologize. I offer a hug. I say I need one as the adult, right? So modeling, expressing emotions, knowing that if it's an emotion that creates tension, that creates disharmony, how to repair is extremely important because you're giving them the playbook of how things can be done and can be done in the most gentle way. Hopefully, that's the example that you're showing, but it's life, right? Harmony, disharmony, and repair. And we have to really practice the repair part, because we're going to be in that space for a really, really long time, many times. um, so that's one thing. And then we have to understand that co-regulation means that emotions are contagious. This is something we didn't talk about. Emotions are contagious. Tension in a room, you can feel it. Happiness and joy in the room, you can feel it. So when a parent shows serenity, or as much serenity as possible, the children will pick up on it. And when they pick up on it, that emotion of serenity will, it'll do its magic. It's going to be, I don't know what the word is. I want to say like it's contagious, but they're the other thing, like it's super contagious. They'll feel it. All right. They'll feel it. So that is what co-regulation is. It's like the figure. It's not only the figure of authority, but because you are the parent and you're the one that kind of sets this, you're supposed to take care of them. You're the kind of access of security. You're the person they lean on. If you're out of sorts and dysregulated, that creates confusion and insecurity in them. So if you can stay as serene as possible, they will pick up on it, and they will understand that emotions have a beginning and they also have an end, that they don't stay there, without any path of, getting repaired and solved. And and slowly they'll take that example that's created at home in their lives, whether it's at school as they grow up. That'll be their pattern, right? And validating emotions, giving them also vocabulary to express how they're feeling, um, and just acting, just feeling, and you feel as an adult, you just express it. We're not superheroes. We're not perfect, and that's something that kids should know. In terms of parenting, and that's going to help them a lot. in understanding themselves, being fair to themselves, and what to expect in relationships, whether they're friendships or their relationships with their partners later on in life.
Well, thank you. That's beautiful. And I wrote down harmony, disharmony, and repair. I think
Mm,
that's a cycle that should be in everybody's living room or kitchen or whatnot, because what it does is it reminds us that the disharmony is temporary and is part of the human experience. And it's just key to work on the creating the tools to learn how to repair, to reach harmony again. And so I think this is a good place for us to close out. There's so much that we shared with you, the listener, or those who are watching. Pause, rewind, do what you need to do, but remember that you are perfect as you are, no matter what culture you live in. All your emotions are valid. You don't need to let them be defined by your society, the gender norms, or the things that are accepted around you. All those feelings are valid. However, part of emotional regulation is to learning how to understand your context and adapt to it in a way that's true to you. True
mhm.
to you. And we shared so many tools that can hopefully be helpful to you. So, Sarah, the last word is yours. What's the last thing you want to share with the listeners as kind of parting ways until next time? Because I can tell I want to talk to you a little more about emotions and parenting,
Mm.
emotional regulation and parenting. So perhaps we do a next one on that one. But for now, what are your parting words for the listeners?
Um, my parting words is we should not, um, feeling is beautiful, and we should embrace that, because I feel a lot of times when certain emotions arise, we have the tendency of wanting to distract ourselves from them, to not feel fully. And I think we should embrace all kinds of emotions, no matter how they make us feel, and know that they have an end. Like there is a peace we can make with them, and a huge learning from it too, and that we are all in progress. We're all evolving, and learning about yourself never ends. And to enjoy the journey, because we still have like a long way to go.
On that note, everybody keep enjoying the journey of not just the podcast and learning about emotional regulation, but also of your life, because the only thing that's promised is the journey, not the
Hmm.
destination. So enjoy it. And until next time, stay emotionally balanced. Sarah, thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank you
you
for
as
having
always.
me.
Thank you so much for listening to Emotionally Balanced with Dito Bala. I really hope you learned something useful and practical today. You learned at least one tool that you can use in your life to remain more emotionally balanced. Please remember that we are dropping these every single week. So share them with your friends, with your family, and everybody that you know. Also, check us out on Instagram at Balance with Bala. We are dropping the some clips from the episodes there and also some additional content. And more importantly, please remember to leave a review if you get a chance. Once again, thanks for tuning in. Stay emotionally balanced. Bye.